to another episode of CBR's Dynamic Duos. This episode, we're joined by Nicole Goux and Dave Baker, cartoonists who have collaborated and have illustrious solo careers to speak of as well. Last spring, Nicole put out Pet Peeves. I should have blanked on the title right there as I was introducing it, but Pet Peeves. And she just won Broken Frontiers 2023 Artist Award for Best Artist for it. And Dave is about to put out Mary Tyler Moorhawk, a wild postmodern graphic novel full of footnotes and prose and all sorts of good stuff. So I'm so grateful to have them joining the show. And without further ado, here are Dave Baker and Nicole Goux.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So, Dave.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
You've been working on this book for quite a while now. I'm sure you know the exact date, but it's been a long time and a big, long process. How does it feel to be about to finally put it out?
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day because I was trying to remember exactly how long it's been. I've been saying it's 5 years. I don't know if that's true. I think I started it in 2019. I think, but I'm not really sure. And the fact that we're nearing completion feels like I think it feels somewhat similar to like it's a mix of a near-death experience and a birthday cake, because this book has been so positively received. The energy and the kind of reviews have been so nice, and everyone's really been getting what I've been trying to do. And I should say that Mary Tyler Moorhawk is a half novel, half comic book project where it's a action adventure story set in a near future where there's a family of globetrotting super scientists who are attempting to stop the world from ending. And that is the comic book section, and our protagonist is this Johnny Questian, Nancy Drewian archetype called Mary Tyler Moorhawk. And then interspersed in that story, there are excerpts from a zine 100 years in the future called Physicalist Today, which is a periodical that is produced by a subculture of people who collect physical objects and comics and movies and all that kind of stuff, in a world where that's all been outlawed. And we follow a journalist who's researching this TV show that he dimly remembers from his childhood, who's named Dave Baker. And he's obsessed with this TV show that got canceled after 9 episodes. And then he ends up discovering that the person who created the TV show was also named Dave Baker, and it sends him off on this strange quest. Which is a way too long synopsis to try and have to say.
Quite the complex. Yeah. How rehearsed does that feel now that you've been able to talk about the book a little bit? I know that, like, when I talk about my books, the first 10 times that I tell someone the story or the synopsis, it's like, this one person is over here, and then they go over there, and then they do this thing. And yeah, so for a book as complicated as Mary Tyler Moorhawk, that must have taken some finessing, right?
Yeah, I think I have gotten better. I've gotten better at just being comfortable with the fact that it is going to be a little bit of a journey to communicate what it is. Because, in the books that you and I make, I think we pride ourselves on making things that are kind of a little bit more brassy, a little bit, you can communicate it very simply. Forest Hills Bootleg Society is about a bunch of bullied teenage girls that start a bootleg hentai distribution ring in their conservative Christian boarding school. Mm-hmm. I've said that sentence, which is already probably 25 words too long, but I've said that sentence so many times. And there just isn't, saying Infinite Jest meets Johnny Quest doesn't really give you an idea what it is.
It doesn't really describe what it is. And it's tricky when you have these books that are kind of trying to be on like a higher level of complexity, to whittle that down to like a one sentence pitch. Like, how do you even do that, to kind of encompass what the idea really is in a couple words? Is so tricky.
How do you pitch Pet Peeves? And have you felt that it's been easier to pitch now that you've done a bunch of press for it and won awards?
Thank you. Yes. Messily, usually. It is much simpler, obviously, than Mary Tyler Moore but because it has a little bit of a twist, it can be tricky. So I usually say that Pet Peeves is about a wannabe musician who has just graduated from music school and is trapped at a dead end job at a bar, and struggling to figure out the path forward to make her music career happen. And after a night of binge drinking at the bar, she takes a, she told you it was messy. On her walk home, she is followed home by a stray dog, and that dog sort of gives her some things that she needs, the support and love that she needs, but also drags her down and gets in the way of some of her goals in the long run. And it's kind of their story and how that plays out.
One of the themes in Pet Peeves that I personally relate to, shocker, is this kind of economic scarcity, or the kind of crushing mechanisms of late stage capitalism, and how it prevents artistic adventurousness, and how it,
Mm-hmm.
the friction between the reality of existing as a person and the dream of pursuing a creative endeavor, um, feels very pertinent to my life, and I think to a lot of people, which is one of the reasons why the book has resonated. But I was curious of, like, do you think in being a cartoonist that friction is a necessity? Do you think that it is just something that is gonna always be there? Like, do you,
Mm,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
I mean, in our society, yeah, kind of. So I don't think I even realized how anti-capitalist the book is until I was um, either well into it or fully done with it. And that's because that stuff is so kind of ingrained into my experience as an artist. And my current frustration as a working professional who is still sometimes struggling to make ends meet. And I think for younger people, it's even more visceral because how do you even break in? How do you do these things? How do you get started? Is so it's the first question everybody has, of course. And so there is this tension between being able to just make whatever you want to make and being able to pay your bills. And I think you and I have both come against this a lot in terms of pitching stories, pitching ideas, pitching whatever, and then also just kind of the time frame that it takes to make something. There's always deadlines. There's always guardrails onto whatever it is that you're doing, and you can't just make a thing. You always have to be considering whether it's imposed by an editor or just imposed by your bank account, you know, that you need to be doing things on a certain timeline and in a certain way. And comics being a commercial medium, um, you know, in places like France, it's considered more of an art than it is in the United States. It's very in the realm of commercial production in the United States. I don't know that you can pull those things apart. That you can say, go and just make the thing, unless you're independently wealthy, you know, or are being supported by a spouse, or the many different ways that people do these things. There are so many working cartoonists that we know who have full-time day jobs, and I am amazed by them because I don't know how they have the energy to do both, because it just takes forever. But you are one of them, you know, like how have you managed over the last 5-10 years to make Mary Tyler Moorhawk, make Halloween Boy, which is your book that you've been making now, and have a full-time job?
I don't know. Sleep, no sleep. I don't know. Sleep is the enemy, man. Sleep is the enemy. I mean, I think yeah, I don't know. I think I think the part of it is I come from a little bit of a place of privilege on that, right? Like, I'm relatively healthy. I
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
have set up my life. I've had the ability to choose to set up my life in a specific way, um,
Mm-hmm.
and not everyone comes from a place where they can do that. I work a day job. I don't have any debt, which is a big thing. Like, I
Huge.
chose not to go to an expensive art school, because
Mhm.
I felt like that would hamstring me later on down the road, and that ability to move freely without debt is that's something that I don't think a lot of younger artists really receive that counsel in, because the myth of,
Mhm.
Otis and RISD and all these other places are like, it's palpable, you want to go to NYU, you want
Yeah.
to have a network of friends that includes all the biggest and the brightest stars of the next generation, but also at what cost, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. In fact, I know that I would not be a full time artist if I had that. Um, do you think that? So I was reading MTMH the other day, and there are certain characters in it that have sort of a similar situation of wanting to make something new and create outside the box of society, but they can only really do it because they are wealthy or have a background of, you know, having an income that is independent of the creative thing that you are trying to make. Do you think that your personal experiences played into that? You know, or your your lack of
Yeah,
finance
yeah.
has
I kind
played
of
into
had
the
not thought
ideas in
about
the book?
that. Yeah, I had not thought
Yeah.
about that from that perspective, but one of the characters specifically in the future segments, uh, Connie
Mm-hmm.
Harvowitz Kurt, she's like she's like an ice cream millionaire. Like she started
Mogul.
uh yeah. She started a chain of ice cream restaurants in Arizona in like the 2100s or something, um and she made a lot of money off of it, and then fucked off to Montana. And the book takes place in a world where there is no idea of like serialized story. Like the idea of story has been so context laundered and ruined, um, due to the removing of physical objects, that in the future, like TV doesn't really exist. It's kind of just like news holograms that like you watch in a communal space, and then like weird, almost like TikTok videos, which quite frankly, I had even forgotten that this was a subplot in the book. And then I was reading a review, and somebody put the names of all of those fake
Oh,
shows.
they're so
Like one was
funny.
like, yeah, one was like, "Will I die if I fall on this?" And I laughed out loud reading that review because I was like, I genuinely don't remember writing this, and that's pretty silly. I would think that's funny. Um,
There's so many things
and
in the book that are just like one-off little things that I know you wrote and never thought about again because they're just like a title for something that is like not that important in the book, someone's history or a thing that they used to do or the name of a show. And they are so funny. And it's just this peppering of humor throughout the book. And I know that you don't remember 90% of them because they're
yeah,
just kind of like there. And unless you're reading the book actively, which I'm sure you did that for a while when you were proofreading, but not anymore.
I've read it so many times that I will never read it again. I will never
Yeah,
read it again.
exactly.
Um,
Anyway, I was
the one that
interrupting you about Connie
No, I
or
mean,
the shows.
no, I think that it's but the idea that she comes at it from a place of privilege, and that like she's resculpting the system and trying to remake the system because she's not oppressed by the system is a scary
Mm-hmm.
idea, because the fact that you're removed from that oppressive lever, and that's the mechanism that allows you the ability to work outside of it, on one level is a beautiful thing. On the other is like, yeah, but if you're not feeling that, you're not understanding the nuances of why it needs to change. And so you're working in
Right. Like
theoretics as opposed to the
the
actual.
only people who have the freedom to make whatever they want and to change the system in a certain way are the people who don't need to change the system because they're not being oppressed, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
which is really
Exactly.
interesting.
And I think that's one of the reasons why in the universe of the show, or in the book, the in universe show gets canceled because Connie doesn't understand it. You know what I mean? Like she's
Mm-hmm.
it's exactly the thing that we're talking about, where she's like, the show isn't getting enough ratings on the dishwashers that we're distributing to, so we're not. Also, for the record, there are no TV sets, so they come up with a workaround where they distribute these television shows to the like the like digital readout manuals on the front of all of these recently manufactured dishwashers.
Right. So MTMH, the show it's the name of the book. It's the name of this future show. Its name is the name of a comic based on the future show. Like,
Well, no, it's the other way
there's
around.
so many.
It's a comic
Oh, it's the
the
comic
show is
first.
based on.
Sorry,
Yes, the comic
sorry, I got it
show is
backwards.
based on. Yeah.
So, and this idea of things becoming other things, and in really weird kind of like interconnected ways. How do you think that like, what does that say to you?
Well, I think part of that is, it's a commentary on the kind of, it's the thing that we've talked about before of like, there's this strange, art and commerce meeting together in a tension filled way where when you're selling a
Mm-hmm.
project, the people in position of power, they want you to not believe in your idea because they want you to give them a chunk of your idea so that if the
Mm-hmm.
idea is successful, they will um, benefit from it. Even down to the degree of like, Siegel and Schuster, they sold Superman. They sold the entire idea for $138.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Kirby sold all of his ideas minus like Captain Victory and like Silver Star. Like he sold everything. And I think it's a moral responsibility as artists, that we control our ideas and we maintain the directionality and intentionality of those things. Um,
Well,
yeah.
and this is a conversation we have all the time, and relates back to the pet peeve theme of how do you make true art in a capitalist system, of particularly when you're starting out, but always, you know, you as a creator are trying to make work and get it seen by as many eyes as possible. But when the system that allows you to distribute and get more eyes on the thing wants to take a chunk of what you own, almost every company is trying to take some sort of piece of your work because, if I'm being kind, how do they pay their bills? How do they print more books? How do they do PR for you? And if I'm being unkind, they want to benefit off you because that's the whole business model. So it's this idea of, especially as a young creator, do you take some lumps? Do you give someone a piece of your creative property to get yourself to move forward in the industry so that you can have a say in what's happening to your work later? Or do you stand your ground immediately from the get-go and possibly never sell anything to anybody and never get it seen? We have some systems now that make it easier for people to do stuff on their own, like Kickstarter and crowdfunding and all those things, but they're not a guarantee. Of course, publishing isn't a guarantee either, regular publishing. But like, it's
Yeah.
a complicated system to navigate, and like, how do you make those decisions?
I mean, I think that everybody has to make those decisions for themselves, right? Where like, I think there is a case where sometimes it's advantageous to give up a piece of something to move to the next level, right? Or to do something in a work for hire
Mm-hmm.
system, or to gain that legitimacy from an outside kind of anointing thing. We've both done it. I worked on Star
Mm-hmm.
Trek, you worked on Batgirl, and I think you know
Mm-hmm.
we've both benefited from those situations immeasurably, and it's allowed us the freedom to go do other things. But I think it's
Mm-hmm.
scary when speaking candidly, both of those things were compromises, right? Like they just inherently are a compromise. You are giving up your time, your energy, your artistic know-how, your ideas to a larger organism and hoping that you can be carried in that slipstream, which I think inarguably we both were. So it worked out great for
Mm-hmm.
everyone. Um,
Yeah.
but I think that there's a danger in that mindset where if you don't come at that with a sense of skepticism, you can end up being used by those various ancillary organisms who are definitely not in it for the best interest of the artist.
Well, and the way that we both went about it, which was, I think, partially fortune of the opportunities that came to us and partially intentionally not giving up certain things. But we both did it in a way that I think we were not giving up any of our ideas whole cloth. We were taking something that already existed and using our time and energy to make new story out of it, but we weren't. So, I mean, other than, there are creation, like I made some characters, you've made some races for Star Trek, there are elements, but it's not like the stories are not our baby, whole cloth that we've created that we are giving to one of these companies to own. And I think there's a difference in personal investment, and the potential for what you could earn out of that thing. If you created Superman and then gave it to DC, imagine all the money they could have made on their own. But if you are telling a story about the Superman who already exists, that's not quite the same thing. You wouldn't have had ownership of that anyway. So
Yeah, and again, it comes from a place of privilege to be able to say no to certain deals. I feel like we
yeah.
have both had very good fortune in that we've worked with a lot of really great publishers and people who really
Mm-hmm.
care.
Yeah.
And we've also had the ability to say no and, say, you know what, this deal isn't for me. And it's not even
Mm-hmm.
always necessarily a rights thing like we're talking about, of the kind of creator ownership thing, which is something that I personally am very passionate about. Sometimes it's just a different perspective on the work. Like, case in point, I got offered I wouldn't say offered. I was asked by a publisher if I would be interested in publishing Mary Tyler Moorhawk with them, but without any of the prose stuff, just as the action adventure comic. And,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that just wasn't what I was trying to do with it. Like, does it make it less commercial? Does it make it harder to find an audience for? Maybe, but I wanted to do the hard thing. I wanted to try and climb the face of Everest, so to speak, existentially.
Well, and I think it also is just an entirely different book. Like the comic sections of Mary Tyler Moorhawk are great and they're super fun and there's a good story there, but it is not the story that you're telling with the comics plus the prose. It is so much more complex. It's trying to do and say so much more than just the comics on their own. And I think that it was the correct decision for you because even, regardless of how well this book does, you are able to tell the story that you wanted to tell in the way that you wanted to tell it. And so by not going with that publisher and waiting, which I know is and was hard to find the person who did want to do it the way that you wanted to do it, I think was, and this is, again, from a place of privilege, you did find that publisher. Top Shelf was excited about the book. They put it out in the way that you wanted to do it, and that's amazing. And that might not have happened, You
Yeah.
took a risk
I mean,
by saying
that's
no.
kind of the reason why, when you said, how does it feel? When I said it feels like a near death experience, because
Mm-hmm.
it's an exhilarating, adrenaline filled thing to see this book that I've been working on for so long come out
Mm-hmm.
100% uncompromised. But I
Mm-hmm.
have to also, in the back of my head, just always be like, this only is happening. The positives of this are only happening because of Chris Staros. Like, Chris
Mm-hmm.
Staros saw what I was trying to do. If anybody doesn't know, Chris Staros is the publisher of Top Shelf. Chris Staros saw what I was trying to do, and he looked at it and was like, I don't know, man, that's weird, but hey,
Let's
maybe it'll
do it.
work. Let's try. Let's try. And that's all.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. I wanted somebody to just be like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but we can swing for the fences and see what happens. And that's that from the jump. That's what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to make something that is very unique and that theoretically doesn't have all that many literary antecedents in the comic book space. There are many in the
Mm-hmm.
traditional prose novel space that I could point to as like, oh yeah, this is me being influenced and loving this writer or that writer, David Foster Wallace and Mark Z. Danielewski specifically. But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of DNA in that soup, and it would not have
Yeah.
happened without Chris Staros. And I think the world of him. And I'm just so incredibly thankful that he saw the vision of the thing that I was trying to do.
Well, and I know that like a lot of this process of making the book was hard, not because of the actual making of the book, but because you were making it kind of without a paddle. You know, a lot of the time when you make a book, you or people in general go and you pitch the book and you say, here's the story, and you say, this is what it's going to be. And the publisher says, okay, here's maybe some money, go make the thing. And with this book, as we've done previous times before, we did this with Tulip. Instead of doing that, partially because the pitch for MTMH is so complicated and kind of hard to see, have a vision for if you're not looking at literally what it is, you were making the book without the guarantee of it's going to get published, you know? And so you were kind of doing the thing, just hoping on a whim and a prayer, a wish on a prayer, like hopefully someone will publish this for a while, you know? And
Yeah.
I know that is
So
a
did you
kind of,
though. So did you. That's what you did with Pet Peeves, no?
I did technically do that with Pet Peeves, but the difference with Pet Peeves is that I started that book as a personal exercise that was never or never intended to actually be published or possibly not be published, depending on how I felt when I was done with it. So I was fully prepared for not publishing it, and I was okay with that. And I think that's an important difference, is that I was doing it because I had been drawing Shadow of the Batgirl and Everyone is Tulip at the same time for like 2 years, and I just wanted to do something different and for myself with no deadlines and no timelines, and also to try writing a longer form thing on my own. And so I didn't know if it was going to work out, if the story was going to work out, if the book was going to work out, any of that stuff. And so the stakes were much lower for that. And I think it did work out, and Avery Hill wanted to publish it, and they were my first choice. So that was incredible. And it got
And
out there.
they
And
seem like they've been a really good partner for you too. Like the book feels like it fits in their line. Ricky has been
mm-hmm.
really good to work with, from what I
Yeah.
understand. You know.
Yeah, they've been great. And since they are kind of a smaller publisher, they have the ability to pay more attention to all of their books, because I think they do 3 books a season, something like that. And so they've been able to focus a little more, which, you know, sometimes you think, oh, I want to be at the big publishers, I want to be at the big names. It's going to mean more if I'm at Simon and Schuster, which we are technically. But while that's great, and you get to say, hey, I was published by Simon and Schuster or Dark Horse or et cetera, sometimes working at the smaller publishers is a much better personal experience and can be better for books in the long run, because their attention isn't going 500 different ways at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
I've definitely experienced that with Top Shelf as well, where, I think Top Shelf
mm-hmm.
publishes like 15 books a year, 14, 12, something like that. And,
Yeah.
the amount of spotlight that's been on my book is significantly more than if it was at, I don't know, insert major publisher here, where it would be one book out of X, I don't even know,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
yeah.
You're not fighting for space as much at a smaller publisher.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about Top Shelf, and also Avery Hill, I think, is that they're small, but they're well respected. So Top Shelf is known as, the art book, the kind of like indie art book place, and people like and respect the books that come out of there, mainly because Chris has good taste and chooses well, and has for the last, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years. How long has he been doing this?
Yeah, a long time. Yeah, he's been in the scene for a minute, right? I mean, he's the person who picked Blankets and was like, "Yeah, this book, let's do
Mm-hmm.
it." And that was,
Yeah.
for me specifically, Blankets and Clumsy and Every Girl is the End of the World for me. That those books really made a huge impact on me.
On a lot of people,
And
I think. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so now to have to have my book standing shoulder to shoulder with them is kind of I don't know. I don't know how to put it into words because I kind of can't process it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like a
Yeah.
oh, this is it's interesting. It's something I don't think I would have anticipated when we started making stuff together is I've told you this before, but like all I really wanted was just to be a guy in the scene, right? I just wanted to be, there's a really famous photo of Jack Kirby's like 93rd birthday or something at San Diego Comic-Con, and in the background is Frank Miller and uh fucking Howard Chaykin, and they're like smoking cigars and talking or whatever. And like that's all I wanted. I just wanted to be a guy in a hotel room at a cartoonist's birthday, or like if you took a photo of a convention floor in 20 years, there would be a footnote in the unofficial history of the 2010s. Oh yeah, that Davy Bakes guy, he was there. And like the thing that's so crazy to me about what we've both accomplished, both separately and together, is that is unequivocally true now. Like
Yeah.
I'm not
Almost even
saying that.
without the books.
Yeah. We've just shown up at enough conventions that there's going to be some photos of us.
Yeah.
But I think now that the interesting thing is like there's an existential heat death that comes with that, where it's like, what is the evolution of the dream when the dream is dead
Mm-hmm.
because you've conquered the dream?
Yeah.
What
What's the
is the
next
next?
step?
What's the next mountain? What's the next?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and there's a piece that comes from that internally, and there's also a restlessness that's a different
Mm-hmm.
type of restlessness, because for a long time you told yourself, oh, I'll be happy when X or Y happens, and then it happens and you're still not happy.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an overstate statement. I think I'm a pretty happy person, but you know what I mean. It's that existential, the quest of the artist, right?
Mm-hmm. Next step,
uh,
toys. Oh wait, that's already happening.
that's right. Pre-order those Halloween Boy toys now, baby. BigBadToyStore.com.
Yeah.
Um, let's segue in topic just a little bit. I have a question for you. Um,
Mm.
my question is, I make things, you make
Mhm.
things, and then we make things
Mhm.
together. That's three
Mhm.
different kind of buckets. Do you see those three things as completely disparate? Do you see them as three interlocking circles where they're almost a Venn diagram where the center is the largest? How do you perceive the
Mm.
body of work that we've generated together and separately?
Oh, that's kind of a complicated question. And I think it's funny because so much of the time, you know, we I come up against this a lot when we're at conventions and you will step away from the table and someone will walk up to the table and be like, "Is this your work?" And I'm kind of like, "Yes, it's my work." When literally half of it is not my work. you know. And I think I say like, everything on the table is either me or my partner or both of us. And so I think there's a part of my head that says all of it is us. Like we are a unit, we do the thing together. And then there's another part that's like, no, we do our stuff that we make together. And then you have all of this beautiful work that you make on your own or with other people. And then I have work that I make on my own or with other people. And so those things are separate. But for me, because I basically started making comics when we started working together, everything that I make is influenced by or referential to the work that we make together. So I think that's a little bit more true for me than it is for you, because you had at least 10 years of comics making on me before we started working together. And so you had a really kind of specific voice and state of mind. I don't know, things that you were saying with your work before we started working together. And it's not that I don't think that I've influenced that. It's that I just think that you had kind of a more stable ground to build on top of, whereas my building together and separate with you has happened simultaneously. So it's more
Yeah,
influenced by itself.
yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I think that there is. I think that there is an overlap though of probably because this is how we function as human beings. Like there's just a lot of stuff that we're both interested in. So
Mhm.
the stuff that we are commonly interested in, I feel like there's a pretty solid through line. Even in the stuff that I'm making solo, I still feel like it relates to the themes that you and I often work in. Um,
Yeah,
just
I
because
would say
we're
that's
interested
true.
in a lot of in the same things. That being said,
I would say, oh, go ahead.
I was
I
just
would
gonna
just
say
say that,
I
like, no, I would say that genre-wise, you have a more expansive range than, so while you're dealing with the same themes, they are kind of couched in more various genres and styles than styles in terms of storytelling, not in terms of art, that than what my range is, I guess, because I'm not always, but like fairly set in the like slice of life, real grounded story
yeah.
realm, whereas yours is more varied.
Yeah, I think that that's probably true. I think emotionally though, I look at everything that you're making either with me or without me as the same thing that I'm doing to a certain degree, because even though Halloween Boy is about a guy who lives on a floating skull-shaped island and rides a dinosaur, it's really just about being lonely. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like it's just
yes.
it's the same thing that I would write for you normally, where the patented Nikki G young girl with hair blowing in her wind staring out over the twinkling city lights scene that's in every one of our books. I've written
Mm.
like 3 of those for myself in Halloween Boy. It's just he's standing on the edge of Hades Island and his mullet is blowing in the wind,
Yeah,
and
you had to
he
give
says,
him flowy hair just
"Yeah,
for that.
yeah, I had to literally grow his mullet longer so I could do the blowy mullet in the wind." Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a good paper there to be written about the amount of the lengths of locks that we both include as stylistic devices in our books.
Well, speaking of our work versus your work or with your work, there's been this interesting progression, I think, in the things that we have made leading up to MTMH, which I I think that we both, I guess we've talked about this a lot, of the kind of frustration with comics as a creator in how quickly someone can read a comic and how long it takes to make a comic. And so, we've kind of been on this progression of developing how to extend the reading experience. And it started with Fuck Off Squad, where we were adding all these captions and little tidbits about our characters. And then it kind of graduated to Forest Hills, where we have many, many captions and also these little kind of asides, paragraphs or essays about the girls and what their lives were like before they got to the school, or about their left socks, or whatever it is, to, kind of the Charizard of MTMH, of comics and prose, with footnotes through everything. Like, some of the pages of prose, the footnotes take up as much space as the essay part does. And you want to talk about like how important it was for you to kind of get more story out of the story, and why you spent so much time putting in so many of these little details and asides and life stories and background information on almost every character in the book.
The the root emotion of that comes from when we got nominated for an Eisner for Everyone is Tulip, and it was very well received. It was a very positive
Mm-hmm.
experience. It was the culmination of a dream, right? I walk around every
Mm-hmm.
day with an Eisner nominee award sticker that they give you at the San Diego convention to put on books to tell people that your book is nominated in my wallet every day. But the one
Mm-hmm.
thing everybody kept saying was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, I love the book. I love the book, but I read it in 15 minutes. I read the book in 15 minutes. I loved it so much." And I think
Mm-hmm.
the note behind that note
As a
was,
compliment, too.
yeah, 100%. It's a compliment, 100%. But the note behind it
Read
is
it in
like,
one
it was
sitting because I liked it so
read in
much.
one sitting, read it in one sitting. It was effortless. I liked consuming it, and therefore it went down smooth. But when you spend, I mean, how long did we work on that book? 3 years? Like when you
Yeah,
when
something
you
like that.
spend that when you spend that long working on a book, you want it to be an experience that lives with somebody for a little bit longer than 15 minutes. I mean, maybe that's selfish, but I feel like it's it's not asking that much. And
Hmm.
so when I started the process of figuring out what my next solo thing was going to be, that was one of the root things, was like, I want to make something that sticks with you, that requires, it was a little bit of a gradual incline of like you're talking about with Forest Hills. The Forest Hills experience was very much the same. I want to make sure that it doesn't take you 15 minutes to read, so we're going to put all these captions. And it went over really well. A lot of people said it was their favorite part of it, but I wanted to take it like even further and have it be just this maximalist thing where low key I was going to just write a novel. Like I was going to
Hmm.
write a novel, and then there was going to be comics as well, and it was going to be everything that I love, and it would, you know, hopefully find an audience of threes of people. But I think the component of that too is like, really, I had read David Foster Wallace's essays forever ago, but I went back and I really got obsessed with him. I read Infinite Jest and A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again and Consider the Lobster and a bunch of his other essays, and I even read a biography on him called Every Love Story is a Ghost Story by D.T. Max. And the way that he uses, if anybody doesn't know, he's a very famous novelist from the 90s who wrote a novel called Infinite Jest. The high concept of the novel is that there's a videotape that has a movie on it named Infinite Jest. And the movie is so fun to watch. It's so addicting to watch that you die. You just sit there and watch it until you starve to death. And the book is anarchic and complicated and follows a sprawling cast of characters, many of whom have addictions. One of whom is a semi-professional tennis player, and the book is told in this way where it fractures the picture plane. You are reading a paragraph and then there'll be a footnote, and the footnote will lead you to the back of the book where there'll be all of this ancillary information and all these strange asides, and I thought, oh, that's such an interesting way of replicating comics's kind of the dual perceptive nature of the comic book medium, where it's an image that sustains separated by a gutter and then another image that sustains, and your mind takes those two disparate things, and with that space in the middle solders them together into information that is a continuous thing. It's this kind of like real strange dummy version of the persistence of vision that happens when you watch 24 frames in a movie flash by your eyes, right? And it appears
Hmm.
as one thing. And when a comic
Hmm.
is really working, those two sustaining or three sustaining or 400 sustaining images separated by gutters get melded into something bigger.
Yeah.
And the idea of taking that Wallace idea of replicating a fractured thought, or of like these discursive asides and putting them on the same picture plane together felt novel, no pun intended. It felt like I could make the comics sections feel like a novel and the novel sections feel like a comic.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the goal. Did it succeed? I don't know,
No, and it's
but
a
I
risk because the thing that I've been saying about this book is that we haven't known how it was going to do because is it too novel? Is it too prose for the comics people? And is it too comics for the prose people? Like, how is this going to be received? It is a risk. But I think that it is a risk worth taking, and if we are to push the medium forward, we got to try doing things like this, combining mediums, changing mediums, and I think, whether it is quote unquote successful or not in terms of sales, I think that it is successful as an experiment, as a novel, as a story. But
yeah.
I also have a really, really important question. But say your thing first, and then I have a really important question.
I mean, one of the things that you hit on there was this idea. One of the other primary influences of the book is this novel called House of Leaves, which is written by Mark Z. Danielewski, which is a novel about a house that is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And he also uses footnotes and graphic design and laying out prose in a way that is very unconventional and experimental and almost confrontationally experimental. And I I read that book on an airplane after we were coming back from some convention, maybe like C2E2 or something. And I was sitting there just like laughing the whole time because he is making comics. He just doesn't know it. He's
Mm-hmm.
using words to fracture the picture plane. And all of
Yeah.
that stuff kind of came together in this big soup where I was, really obsessed with both of those novels. I was obsessed with the movie Buckaroo Banzai, written by Earl MacRausch, and kind of just like all of that stuff congealed into like I'm gonna do the thing that if I found it, I would think it is the weirdest, coolest, strangest thing ever made. And I have no idea if there's going to be anyone else that'll read this, but at the very least, I'll be able to look at it and be like, man, I really did it. Really
Well,
did
good
it.
or bad, it makes an impact because it feels different, right? That's the thing that sticks with us is the thing that is new, the thing that is different, the thing that is using the formative qualities of a thing to change your perspective, right?
That's the goal, right? That's the goal. Whether the success or failure of that, I don't think that's up to me to decide.
Yeah.
Because to me, it is a success in that I finished it and it is done and it was an experiment.
You made the
And
book.
I
Hey, you have a copy of the book at your house right now.
look at that. Look at
Amazing.
that. Look how chunky
Beautiful.
that dude is.
It's huge. Yeah, I know. So my really super important question that I think maybe only you will get is, do you think that Infinite Jest was inspired by that one episode of The Next Generation where everyone gets obsessed with the video game that gives them pleasure? And they stop doing everything else. They stop feeding themselves. They stop running the ship. They stop doing anything. And Wesley is the only one who's not super turned on by this game and has to save the crew.
I no, it wasn't. But B, if memory serves, Wallace was a Next Generation fan. He loved David Lynch and specifically Twin Peaks, and he loved Next Generation. So it's
There you
not
go.
out of the realm of possibility that it could be like a weird.
It could be. I think
it could be.
my headcanon is going to be that it is.
Yeah. I know that he worked on it for years, so I'd be curious when. Let me just look up when the actual pub date was.
Timeline wise.
Yeah, because this is a good. So it got published in '96. So that episode definitely existed at that point.
Totally.
But when did he start writing it, and did it? Yeah, I don't know. It's also like. It's also something of a false comparison because the high concept of that book sounds very commercial, and it's not really what the book's about. Like it is, but it isn't. But it is. But I think you could draw a seed.
Could have been a
Yeah,
seed.
could have been a seed. And I think you can draw a pretty straight parallel between some of the stuff he does in just on a humor front in Infinite Jest and some of the humor in my book. I'm very influenced by his year of the depends adult undergarment mechanic. In the book, there's a really silly mechanic where all of we live so far into the late stage capitalism that they don't even have names for years anymore. Numerical numbers for years don't exist. And every year is named after a product that a corporation has purchased. They purchased the right to name it that from the government, I guess. And one of the main years is the year of the depends adult undergarment, which is
you can feel a lot of that dystopian sci-fi corporation anti-capitalist stuff kind of throughout, specifically the prose stuff of NPMH.
Yeah, I mean, hot take: capitalism not so hot sometimes, But But also, please go pre-order my book. It's available for purchase now. There's no, there's no other
out
way
on
of doing
February
this.
13th.
Yeah, February 13th, Mary Tyler Moore Hawk, available wherever books are sold.
Buy it for your sweetheart for Valentine's Day.
I know, isn't that so funny that it's like this like super bleak, mania-filled meditation on the futility of art, and the symbiotic relationship between the art and the artist, and it's like, hey, honey, I got this for you for fucking Valentine's Day.
Hope you like it. Isn't it romantic?
Isn't it romantic? You want to give me a smooch? Yeah, I don't know. I'm just so thrilled that it's done. I'm thrilled that it's out. I'm thrilled that it exists. And, it's another book to put on the shelf now,
Yeah, you've got quite the shelf now.
So do you, friend. So do you.
Getting there. Yeah.
Well, speaking of your guys' extensive shelves, what are you guys working on now? Any new projects in the works? I know you've got a Halloween Boy ongoing, Dave. Any other things you can tease for fans and readers out there?
We are working on another book, a joint book. It's all written, and most of the artwork is completed, and it has been signed up to a publisher. So hopefully there will be an announcement soon. Also, if you listen to other interviews with us, we probably have talked about it before, but I think now, because we're actually like in talks with this publisher, we shouldn't say, so they have like a actual thing to announce. But yes,
we'll just
Nicole
say that if you like Fuck Off Squad and Forest Hills, you will probably like this as well. It's along the same vein.
Yes.
And then I also have another very large book that I am working on, which I think gets announced like next week, but I can't talk about until next week. So.
Oh man, our timing's either perfect or awful, but either way, something to look forward to the announcement. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Keep an eye out.
Well, now I've got to look forward to you guys doing like the Infinite Jest Next Generation Star Jest adaptation. Picard playing
dude,
tennis,
it's just
like a
Worf
as a wheelchair
Who's
assassin.
the Howling Condenser? Yeah. I'm trying to think of who would be.
You know how they do those like Star Trek rewatch podcasts where they do like an episode per. Maybe we should do that with Infinite Jest.
Don't fuck with me, Nick. I will.
It's that like you've read it and I haven't.
Yeah. I think that sounds super fun. I don't know that you'll love it. It's really dense, but to me, I loved it. I was like, this is fucking amazing.
Years to do because it will take me forever to read it.
Yeah. When Jason Segel played David Foster Wallace in the movie adaptation of End of the Tour, that is what he did. He went to He went to a bookstore, bought Infinite Jest, and as he was checking out, the clerk, rang him up and was like, "Oh, is this your first time reading Infinite Jest?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's actually for research. I'm going to be playing David Foster Wallace in a movie." And he's told the story before on late night appearances. So this is not me spoiling anything or taking someone else's story. But the way Jason Segel described it is it was like something from a movie where the clerk and the guy next to him looked at each other, and the clerk goes, "Book club?" And the other guy goes, "Book club." And they met every week, and they read 100 pages a week, and they talked about it from front to back. Yeah.
Man.
Very cute.
It's pretty charming, and also made me extremely jealous. I want to go hang out with Jason Segel and read Infinite Jest and bullshit about it. That sounds great.
Don't we all? Maybe. Kind of.
I don't. Judging by how many copies of that book are unread, probably not. But I love it. I think it's great.
Well, if you guys put that podcast together, let me know. I'll be happy to listen.
I'm into it, man. I'm into it. Yeah, let's do it.
Start a newsletter.
Yeah.
well, gosh, I'll stop recording here. But thank you both so much for joining us today, and can't wait for the new book announcements and Mary Tyler Moorhawk coming out on the 13th. And thank you both so much.
Thank
Yeah, thanks for
you
having us.
for having us.